Ethereum is just a few percent away from a new all-time high, and the last time we were here, the people who made the right decision secured massive gains, while other ones saw their profits fade away. And that is bringing me to the question right now that a lot of people have: should I sell my Ethereum? What if it keeps going up, and should I hold those positions? In this video, I'm going to tell you what you should do if you're holding Ethereum to secure your profits and increase those profits by taking smart decisions. I'll show you step by step how I would be approaching the markets and all the decisions that I would make right now. Before we're going to continue with this episode, I would like to ask you for a small favor. It doesn't cost you anything, but if you become a subscriber of this YouTube channel, I'll make the deal with you that I'll continue to provide the content that I think is super valuable for you. And it's just a small gesture. I think more than 40% of the people that watch the content aren't subscribed. But if we keep on growing this YouTube channel, we are able to expand the channel with even better quality content and even better content for you to consume if you're holding a portfolio in the market. So thank you very much and welcome to the community if you subscribe. Now, last week we were discussing mispricing, altcoin markets, Ethereum, and mispricing is when something is going extremely high or extremely low compared to what the fair value must be in the short term or in the long term. And today we're going to talk about Ethereum, which has been going absolutely bananas. In this video, we'll talk about whether you should be selling ETH or not and secure profits, which became one of the core questions being asked on X and on YouTube. And I think there are two crucial factors that we need to take into account in trading while holding Ethereum. And one is securing your profits, and two is to maximize your profits and to compound those returns. And if I go back in my journey, one of the big mistakes that I've made is that I continued to hold in the assumption that I was going to be making more profits by simply holding the assets, while actually being a little bit more conservative and taking profits and then re-entering at a low point in the markets. That's yielding you a way higher return, and it's also way more relaxed. So first, Ethereum has been going up by more than 120% in less than 2 months, which brings me back to the mispricing principle and mispricing example. And then I would like to compare the current price to the price that we had in 2022, or actually last year. But let's just assume the 2022 pricing, where you were buying ETH at cycle low valuations. You were doing the exact opposite of what everybody was telling you to do, where Ethereum has just come from 4.8k and is currently swimming around 1.3k. In this example, if your horizon is, let's say, 5 years from now or 1 year from now, it doesn't really matter because the risk isn't really high of buying ETH at that point in time. In hindsight, everything is easy, but there wasn't really that much downside, while there was a lot of upside, or actually a gigantic upside that could be made. Now, if we reverse that towards the current price action, and if you're buying ETH at the current price levels, then Ethereum has just been making a massive run from 1.5 to 4.6k. So you could argue that it's still going to be higher in 5 years from now. 1 year from now is debatable, given the markets go up and down in that Burj Khalifa pattern. But short term, there are better opportunities to go for, as it's slightly mispriced to the upside. As you can see on the left side of the chart, we've seen that price levels earlier in the year were lower than right now. And that has resulted into a crash of 65%, after which we've just had this massive run on Ethereum. So in hindsight, if we look at the valuation around 4k at the beginning of the year, it was extremely tricky to be buying the asset during that period, which showcases the amount of risk you have by buying high with those valuations of those altcoins. So that was one of the big pain points for myself, is whether or not I should be buying in high or whether or not I should be continuing to hold my positions and not locking in my profits. And if we go back to the main principles, and if you are avoiding to take profits, then you're going to be the one that's being sold on, and then you're going to be back holding your position through the entire next bear market, which I think is not really beneficial for anyone. So if we go back into the prime principles on the markets, and in that case, let's assume you are holding your ETH at those lower regions at 1.6K. During that period, the markets were irrationally crashing down due to macroeconomics. Fundamentally, a lot of things have been happening, so the valuation of ETH at that point in time was mispriced. And that is where we have been seeing the incredible surge of the price of Ethereum in the last period, while a lot of people were understanding this concept. While right now, the risks have gone up substantially, and we could be seeing a correction in the markets in the short term, and that could be harming your portfolio substantially. So let's say you were holding Ethereum during that 1.6K level, it tripled nearly in the same period. So if you have a 20 to 30% correction, it's going to be painful for the entire portfolio of your crypto portfolio. So we are not in the markets to be buying the exact bottom. We are not in the markets to be selling the exact top. We are looking to get a return on our portfolio that is higher than the benchmark. And in that case, we would like to compound our profits. If you're locking in profits at some point in time, whether or not it goes up even more after that, doesn't really matter. You've locked in your profits, and you can reassess when the markets are mispriced to the downside by getting into an opportunity during that period. And through that strategy, you can actually start compounding your profits, which might not yield you the returns in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to be an exponential curve. And that is where it becomes interesting with holding ETH at this point in time, where I think that if we've just had this big run, there's nothing wrong by selling 20 to 40% of your ETH position and going into cash, becoming a little bit more flexible with your portfolio, as flexibility is key. And if we have a correction taking place, then you can use the money flow cycle as a principle, where we saw Bitcoin going up, money flooding into ETH, ETH going up, and then ETH stabilizing, where likely we are going to get a lot of money flowing into the rest of the ecosystem in ETH or in altcoins. So in that case, I would like to use one practical example, which is the fact that let's assume you have 5 ETH and you bought them at 2K. So your portfolio is 10 grand. This is now worth 22.5K. You've got a massive return in 2 months, as it went up by 12.5K on a portfolio of 10K, which is great. Now let's say you sell 30% of your allocation. You had 5 ETH. You sell 1.5 ETH for 4.5K each. That is resulting you into 6.7K in cash. So your portfolio right now is $6,750 in cash and $15,750 in ETH, so totaling the 22.5K. If the markets correct by 30% and you're just holding everything and not selling anything, your portfolio crashes down to 15.7K, and you need to get ETH back up to 4.5K to go back to that 22.5K mark. While if you were selling 30% of your ETH and the market's correct, the impact on your portfolio is way less. And if you reuse that money buying back into the markets, you'll be up way faster. So let's say you have 6.7K in cash and the 15.7K in ETH. If the markets drop by 30%, your portfolio drops from 22.5 to 17.8K, which is significantly higher than where you're just holding everything. In this case, you can be using all the cash to be buying back into ETH. Let's say you do that, then you're able to buy 2.14 ETH instead of 1.5 ETH for that amount of money. which results into 5.64 ETH as you're buying in at a lower valuation. And if that goes back up towards the levels of 4.5K, your portfolio is going to be worth more than $25,000. So by actively moving the assets, by de-risking yourself in an upwards move that's a little bit more skewed to the upside, you can actually grant yourself a bigger return by being more conservative than by simply holding your assets. And I think that's the key principle that I would like to apply into my altcoin portfolio, which we have been doing, but which you also can be doing while you're holding ETH and not holding altcoins. So in this principle, we're going to dive a little bit deeper, because I think that if you take profits on ETH, independent of where it's going to go to from here, you can use those funds in a smart way, strategic way, by even compounding your returns through the entire ETH ecosystem. And for that, I'm going to use the charts. The key principle I've learned is to be taking profits no matter what the markets are telling you, no matter what social media is saying to you. And then the next part is that you can compound those returns into buying back into the markets the moment that the markets are providing you an opportunity. So scaling out of anything at those highs in case of ETH for 20 to 40% is good, to be securing those profits and to be flexible with your portfolio. And before we're going to continue talking about the opportunities that are in the markets, is if we simply look at the portfolio, or like if we look at the chart of Ethereum, we can see that it's currently at $4,600 in USD, which is quite, well, extended to the upside. So it is a vertical move to the upside. Quite often we can see that even though we are having upwards moves in a bull market, we are going to have a relatively harsh correction taking place, given the fact that we've just been taking all the liquidity to the upside. So all the shorts have been taken out, which means that a lot of people are currently leveraged long in the markets. I don't believe that there are many spot buyers coming in at this point. So market makers are also less incentivized to be trading here, given that it's quite far away from the fair price, which means that the risks have increased of buying ETH at these valuations here. On the daily time frame, we see quite high RSI levels. On a 3-day, we see high RSI levels, and you can see that we've been taking these previous highs. And on the 4-hour time frame, we can also technically see that we have some spikes in volumes here, which I think is shorts being trapped out of the markets, in which case longs are currently being trapped into the markets to provide additional liquidity for new shorts to be opened, and then the markets are going to go back down. And usually there's some weird news item coming in, and then the markets are going to correct for a little bit, and potentially we are creating a bearish divergence on the 4-hour time frame. So that results into a case of building a lot more stamina into the markets and to have some more profits being secured into the portfolio, through which XRP has been providing an example of harsh corrections that are able to be made. In this case, we have seen XRP breaking previous highs, and in this case as well, earliest was during 2025 in January. We took the high and then we crashed all the way down by more than 50% or close to 50%, while in the second case we were taking the high and then we corrected from $3.66 all the way towards $2.75. So it wouldn't be strange for Ethereum to go back to 3.6 to 4K per ETH, and in that case that's a way better entry level to go for. But I think it's even better to secure your profits and to understand the money flow, which is Bitcoin moves, as I said, then Ethereum moves, Ethereum stalls, which is the correction takes place and then it's not making new highs, and then the money flows into the other ecosystem plays, which are actually leverage bets on Ethereum. And if we look at those examples, we can see that things like Optimism have not been breaking out of their level as of yet. If we look at the valuation during January of 2025 or December of 2024, there's still more than 200% to be made in order to get back to those prices where fundamentally most of those projects have been continuing to build, which results into a lot of upside to be made. So I think in prime principle, the same can be said for Arbitrum, which is currently facing a crucial resistance. And once it breaks through it, we can see it here on the left side as well, it's going to yield us into a vertical move, or at least a new trend upwards, where also plays like Eigenlayer haven't really been breaking out of the markets as of yet, or things like ETHFI are all providing the same sort of chart where we can see that the volume has been picking up, which means that there's a lot of accumulation taking place in order to be positioned into likely a big upwards move on the entire ecosystem. So ultimately, I think that if you are taking profits and ETH is going to stagnate and you have that position in cash, I think that if ETH stabilizes over the coming periods and the ecosystems are going to go up, you can even yield a higher return by investing into the ecosystem after the next correction has taken place. And once they go up, you need to resort it back into stables, ETH, or Bitcoin. The question of this video is whether you should be selling ETH, and ultimately it's all depending on your personal preference. However, if you'd ask me, and I'm a trader and I'm an investor, I'm not a maximalist, well, I'm a portfolio maximalist, but after this run, I'd be scaling out of my position in the markets to be securing profits and to become more flexible, because I don't know where we're going to go to. But all I do know is that we've had a lot of momentum with ETH and that it's like a little bit overpriced in the short term, or mispriced, as I would say. So usually the markets are going to go back into the fair price. And by being a little bit more conservative with my strategy, I'm creating flexibility in which I can compound my returns by investing into the ecosystem and to yield myself a higher return by being more conservative. So if you sell a portion into ETH, your allocation is still going to be skewed towards ETH. So even if ETH goes up even more, you will still get a return out of that position. And I think that you need to remind yourself that nothing goes up forever. So you need to be locking in those profits in order to be safe and not sorry for your portfolio. I hope you have been enjoying this update. Thanks for watching. And on Sunday, we'll talk about the altcoin portfolio. Ciao.